you guys spend some time with us tonight. Our keynote speaker tonight, really excited to have him here. The author of his new book, Beyond 1%. If you didn't get a chance to grab that, you definitely want to. It's a pretty inspiring story. I met Brock, I don't even know if he remembers this, it was about 4 years ago. It was right before COVID, I think. We were down in Montpelier at a trivia night, and we got put on the same team on trivia. And I knew his story, but I was like, hey, I'm not going to bring that up. I don't know how he feels about it. I'm not going to talk about it. Just wanted to get to know the guy. We sat next to each other and had a really great fellowship that night. And he's just, one of those A++ people that you meet in this world. So really excited to have him here tonight to share his story with you folks and to inspire you guys in whatever you're facing in this world today. So everyone give a big round of applause to Brock Neal.
Thank you all for being here, and it's been a great program. I'm always glad to come up to Michigan. So I live in Ohio, I'm speaking in Ohio, and I'll be speaking in Michigan, and usually I have to change the jokes I make based on which state I'm in. And sometimes I forget, and then I realize when I tell a joke and no one laughs, I'm like, oh wait, wrong state. But no, it's been really great. I just 2 months ago, a little less than 2 months ago, I finally released a book I've been working on for pretty much 17 years. I was in a car accident 17 years ago, and during that time, or shortly after leaving the hospital, I started to journal my experiences, and at that time, really for no other purpose than to have that therapeutic effect of putting my feelings and emotions down onto paper. And at that time, I was nearly bedridden, so it was about all I could do. That was back in 2007, and another big twist in our story was that I was a senior at school in Columbus, Ohio, that you all know, and my brother had been recruited by several schools. I think the first school that recruited him was Miami of Ohio. He got a call from Purdue University and other Big Ten schools to play football. And his junior year of playing football, he had gotten a call from a coach at the University of Michigan, and it was the offensive coordinator, Coach DeBoer, that called him, and he got called down to the office. And I always love that story because, of course, you think you're in deep trouble, and he thinks of all the things that he did wrong and what it could be that he was in trouble for. But he had been told that a coach from Michigan wanted to meet him, and he asked which Michigan, Central Michigan, Western Michigan, Michigan State, and of course being the University of Michigan, it was a pretty big shock for us. I mean, just to have a school of that stature want him to come play football was really cool. But for me, I was actually down in school in Columbus, so it wasn't quite so cool to everyone else. But in any case, he ended up taking a visit to Ann Arbor, and I think the bar was about this high as far as expectations, and it just blew him away. I mean, he just fell in love with it, and I remember him calling me because I was in my dorm in Ohio State, and he told me that he had made a decision that he was going to go play there, and my jaw hit the floor. And about 2 weeks later, I think I bought my first maize and blue clothing item, and I thought, oh, here we go, like this is what we're doing, I guess. And it was all pretty surreal. But again, that would have been his junior year, and going into his senior year. But in the fall of his senior year, I actually I worked at the family business. My family we run a concrete company in Ohio, and I took off one semester of school to work the family business, and I thought, well, I'll go back to school in January when things slow down and the snow's blowing and flying. as most families do, that Christmas Eve, we were actually visiting with family about 10 miles from our home in Wasion, Ohio, and as we were coming back home from that party, a car ran a stop sign and hit our car, and life as I knew it stopped. I actually blacked out. There's not a lot that I remember about that accident other than after waking up, having someone that I didn't know jump on the car to ask me if I was in pain and what I was feeling, and having to wait what seemed like hours for them to open up the car and get me out. And in that moment, I felt the most pain I've ever felt in my entire life. And I remember the man telling me that that's what I would feel, but at the time I hadn't felt anything. And I didn't really think about what had happened to me. I was trying to think about where everyone else was. And my hope was that everyone had gotten out of the car. And so when I was pulled from the car, I felt this immense pain, and I didn't know what happened. I got taken to our local hospital and realized that they didn't have the capabilities to take care of whatever was wrong with me, so then I had to go to Toledo. And again, I still really didn't realize what had happened, but I spent 8.5 hours in surgery and woke up, and in that moment, what seemed like only a few seconds went by in that 8.5 hours. And when I woke, I was told that I had a spinal cord injury, that I had 2 vertebrae completely shattered in my back, and that it was likely I would never walk again. And the piece that I really remember and highlight in that moment was when she told me that everybody wants this number, and that a 1% chance of ever walking again would be the best anyone could hope for. That if I was given all the credit in the world and was in the absolute best position, that 1% of ever feeling my legs or moving my legs again would be the absolute best I could ever hope for. And needless to say, I was extremely discouraged. I mean, it was the most painful, that was the most painful moment of my life, and that was Christmas Day. And I know that I was told prior to getting surgery that my father had passed, but it still didn't stick with me until that day after surgery of really being told again that had happened. My brother's girlfriend passed away in the accident as well, and it was something that, you know, our family will never, ever forget and never be able to fully, you know, get over. Those are things that couldn't be changed in that moment, but I clung to this 1% chance of walking again in the hopes that I could change one thing about that night. And a lot of times when I go out and I speak, I talk a lot about the circumstances that were given. And for me, in that moment, I felt all of these things that happened to me were my fault. That there weren't, you know, I go back in my mind and I think of different things I could have done, that I could have just stopped to tie a shoe and that accident wouldn't have happened, but I had no way of stopping it. And I had to make decisions every day, as we all do, to take, you know, responsibility for what my life was gonna be. And something that, again, while I was writing my book and journaling, that it really stuck out to me that when I got to Michigan, the doctors had not really told me one way or the other what my life was gonna be, which I think was the scariest part of moving on with my life, was being told that this is what your life will be like, which it was having to have help for everything, which I am someone that I don't like asking for help. I don't like being helped. I just want to do my own thing and be independent, as most people are. But I was told that, you know, your life is going to be like this, that your mom will drive you around from now on, that you may have to have a wheel. At that time, I had a broken arm, and they said you may have to have a wheelchair that is motorized to take you everywhere you go. And what I clung to in Michigan was the doctor telling me that 90% of what happens in my life after this is going to be up to me, that 10% of what the doctors can do is keep me healthy, which most of the time I had some complication of dehydration, of even sitting up that I would get lightheaded and pass out, and that was very discouraging to say the least, because I had in the back of my mind and my prayer every day was that I would have this chance to walk again, that I would miraculously be healed. I spent 3.5 months in the hospital, and I did start to have twitching in my legs. By the time I left the hospital, I had twitching in my muscles, and I could twitch my leg. At that time, I mean, it often reminds me of when they test for reflexes, but I would be giving every focus and piece of effort I had just to twitch a leg. And I spent another over a year doing outpatient physical therapy, and for anyone that's done physical therapy, you realize just how challenging and frustrating it can be to have to be less than 100% and not know, your 6 to 8 weeks, is this, 4 to 6 months, when will you be back to that 100%? And for me, it became a constant reminder of you're not going to be 100%, that you need to accept the wheelchair. And I spent that year of physical therapy, which was the hardest physical effort I'd had to do in my life, that I could kick my leg halfway out. And I realized very quickly that I didn't want to spend another year of my life doing physical therapy if it meant I could kick my leg out twice as far. And the special moment to me, and whenever I give these speeches, I'm always trying to push the book because I don't want to spoil it all. But I've loved doing the book because there's so much more detail. But that was something too that, looking back, I think in our lives we never, sometimes we do, but most of the time I don't think we realize these turning points, these like pivotal moments, until they're past. It might be a year later, it might be years later, but you look back and you realize how consequential this small moment was. And for me, that moment was at the hospital meeting Elliot's strength and conditioning coach, who told me that he just, out of the blue, I met him, I met several coaches, and right away he just said, "You're gonna walk again, I know it." And he asked me when I wanted to start working out with my brother and the football team in the weight room at Schembeckler Hall, which was pretty exciting to me. And the physical therapist wasn't as excited about that. She actually told him that you're not supposed to say that to somebody because he's not going to walk again. And I tried to interject that, well, I think that could happen. And he wasn't deterred at all. And he actually bugged me for that next year about coming to come work out with the team. And needless to say, it was a consequential moment in my life, because after a year and a half of doing physical therapy, I was pretty much at the end of the road as far as insurance and functional progress. And I had many people tell me it was time to just move on with your life the way it is, especially after the 2-year mark. They say that with spinal cord injuries that there's no healing. And I always thought it was funny because, they tell me I'm never gonna walk again, and then after 2 years they say, now you're really never gonna walk again. And I don't understand that concept. Now I'm really not gonna walk again. But Mike did, it was really cool the way that everyone was asking if they could do something for me, and everyone's really polite. I'm always very grateful for, especially have a young lady run up to open a door for me, and he's like, "Oh, thank you." and that's backwards, but okay. But I'm always grateful for those things. But Mike stood out to me because he would, when I would visit my brother, he would ask me a favor. And he'd say, "Hey, could you do me a favor?" And not always that direct, but would you let me train you? And over that time, I realized I met all these cool people, not just Michigan football players, but I had met Olympians, and I had met other baseball players, you name it, gymnasts and other athletes that Mike had trained. And I remember one of the times I was visiting Elliot that someone came in with, and not very normal because he had these huge medals around his neck, and they were Olympic medals. And I remember, didn't he swim with Michael Phelps, in Greece? And yeah, that's Peter Vanderkay. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. And I thought, how can I be like this guy, but I noticed all these great athletes that Mike had trained, and I thought it was so cool because he pretty much was trying to recruit me as a 5-star athlete, which I can say I was definitely not at any point in my life, let alone at that period of my life. And he was really trying to recruit me to be one of these athletes that he had trained, that he could highlight. And I thought that was so cool because, as I said, so many people wanted to help me, and I was so grateful for all that. But then here, Mike again, is this like a backwards thing? It's like, you want me to come work out with you as a favor, and somewhat jokingly, I eventually did tell him that, you know what, I'm feeling generous, and I'm gonna let you train me. I'm gonna let you do that. And I remember my brother telling me, don't do that. But he just said, you will get treated like every one of these football players that you get to see train and work out every day. And I said, that's what I want. And lucky for me, I did go back and I got my degree. I finished my undergrad degree. And my brother said, that's probably why you're crazy enough to do this, because you were crazy enough to go to Ohio State for school. And I remember Mike telling me that I can't, I had to commit to this thing and I can't quit. And I thought, well, I'm not going to quit. That's not how I was raised. If I commit, I'm going to finish what I start. And I remember Mike telling me that I will want to quit. And I said, no, I won't want to quit. And after 1 hour of training, I told Mike I want to quit. And I had many, many times that I wanted to quit because I spent 6 to 8 hours in the gym training with these guys every day. And it was always funny because I would try to find a way out of it. And usually, like my brother would be able to train for 2 hours in the off season. They get like 2 hours to train in the weight room. Then they have to go 2 hours of study table. Then they're off to class. And I mean, they had this real regimented schedule. And I remember telling Mike that, I can only be in the gym 2 hours. And he said, no, you're not, that's not true. He's like, you're not on scholarship. Like, you're not a part of the NCAA. You just stay here the whole time. And I thought, well, lucky me, how great is that? But I would spend 6 to 8 hours in the gym, not always working out. I mean, I would have to go and get lunch, which I never had enough energy to eat, but I would be stretching. I would have them stretching me. I'd be on an Easton machine that would be moving my muscles. I could just lay there. But we did all these different things that were just so unconventional. And there were a lot of things that I did that I couldn't do in physical therapy, usually because they weren't very safe. But he always told me, and I always thought that was funny as well, he said, if you're gonna learn to walk, then you're just gonna have to learn to fall, because you're going to fall all the time, which I did. And I was so blessed by this, but I've had so much in the past. That would have been back in 2010, so this is 14, 15 years ago that I trained with Mike, which is hard to believe, but I had so much interest in my story, and mainly for me, the great support came from being with the team. I think after the first 2 months of training, they realized that I could crawl on the ground on my own, and they realized, why are you using this wheelchair when you can just crawl? And I was like, why didn't I think of that? And so whenever I wanted to break, like, do I get a rest? They'd be like, yeah, your rest is you crawl from here over there. And then we do that machine. But over that period of time, I really became this part of the team. And it was such a cool thing to feel included when you feel like so much of an outsider for so long. I mean, when I would go in that gym, I felt so out of place with these athletes, because I knew I was the weakest point in my life, and how am I going to, blend in? And I realized how much attention each of those players would give me, and it was such a great thing. I have a lot of really great stories from being in the gym. One of the ones I remember, because I will say, eventually it became a rumor that I was going to lead the team onto the field, and then that rumor just kind of became reality. I actually got asked by the head coach, Rich Rodriguez, at the time, to announce it to the team and just say, we're just going to do that. Like, let's just go with the rumor. And I said, sure. And then as soon as I left his office, I remember Parker, who was one of Mike's trainers, he said, the Big House is the largest stadium in the country, right? And I said, well, yeah, I knew that. He's like, well, you just said yes so fast. And I'm like, well, I didn't think about that part. And at that time, I had just stopped. I'd been walking in these leg braces that kept my legs straight, these KFOs that I would walk around, and most of the time I was walking with my arms, and I would just lift my entire upper body and swing the other leg, and I would walk really slow. But I had just gotten to the point of trying to get out of those where I could really use my arms to walk, but I could have a little bit of support from my legs. And so I still had a really long time a long ways to go before I got to where I could walk the 60 yards it was going across the field side to side. But the story I do love to tell about that is, obviously I made tremendous progress during that time. But I remember as we were trying to walk a little faster and not, as they say, not milk the crowd too much for applause. He's like, I know you can go faster than that. I actually ended up rolling my ankle the week before I walked out, and pretty bad, because I was very much wanting to, carry myself and not have someone swoop in every time. And I remember taking my shoe and my sock off. At that time I was using AFO, which got my ankle locked up so I didn't drag my foot. We took all that off and looked, and I have never seen an ankle as black and blue as my ankle was. And Parker told me, he's like, that looks like it really hurts. And I said, it does look like it really hurts, and I bet it probably does. But up until that point, I still had very little feeling in my legs. And at that point, I was pretty grateful for that. And we ended up walking, and one thing I will share, which is the cover of the book effectively, is being able to walk out onto the field. And it was this incredibly awesome moment. And again, I thought just something that was really cool about that was I had just graduated less than a year ago from Ohio State, and then I was sitting at the tunnel in the big house ready to walk onto the field. And I remember Mike telling me that no one's going to be booing you, that we know of. And he said during the game, there's going to be people booing and yelling and everything, but he's like, when you walk out there, every person's going to be cheering for you. And I think it was so illustrative of my whole story, which is just having this massive amount of support, and especially with the election coming up, you don't see much of that where everyone agrees on anything, but I had so much support that I was like, how can you fail? And I do remember having the caveat. He told me that even if you do fall, they'll just cheer more, so it's fine. I was like, that gave me a lot of confidence going out there, but I did. I stood up, I walked out on the field, and it became one of the easiest things in the world in the moment. I felt like it was one of those things that just happened for me, and I wasn't even part of it, because there wasn't anything in my life up to that point that I had truly given 100% of myself towards. I mean, even on the days where I slept for 14 hours, Mike would tell me, that's great. Like, your body needs 14 hours of sleep at this point. But even if I went out with friends, it was constantly in the back of my mind that I just need a break away from those workouts, and that was my break away. But it's still in the back of my mind thinking about walking. And in particular that day, I spent about 320 some days with Mike leading up to that game. And I spent about 280 of those days where I knew I was going to be walking out at that game. And it's such a cool thing, because now that I finished this book and I put it out, I've really realized that I don't like to put it out there so people know who I am or what my story is, as much as I do, hopefully, to reach people just as I do when I go and speak. I hope that people pull things from my story that help them achieve the goals that they have in their life, or helps them go through the same situation I went through, which is having your faith shaken to the core, and having to really realize, what do you truly believe? And in those difficult moments, certainly for me, I prayed more than I have ever in my life, but every morning, every night, and throughout the day. And most of the time, those prayers were certainly about walking, but even more than that is asking God, where are you? Like, why are you not here? Why aren't you doing anything? Why am I not just miraculously standing up and walking again? And again, looking back and journaling, I've realized, he was there the whole time. But if you don't go back and look, you just have that in the chaos of it all, you don't see those things. And I certainly didn't either. I don't want people to assume I did, but I look back and then I see all those pieces that were laid perfectly in line for my benefit, for me to get to this point, which again, just for me, it wasn't the glory of walking out, and I had a shirt that said glory to God, but I realized how little I had to do with standing in this stadium in front of over 100,000 people cheering, not just for me walking again, but really knowing that a family went through something so traumatic and came out the other side. And one thing I loved with the book and working with the publishers I had is having somebody else look at I had written 450 pages, and we went down to about 210. But when they looked at that book, and my ghostwriter said that she started reading the 400 pages at about 7:30 or 8 o'clock after dinner, and she planned on reading 100 pages. And she said at about 2 a.m. her husband had told her, "You have to go to sleep now," because she couldn't put it down. And what she gathered from that was, outside looking in, is seeing all of these items from the first page to the last page of God, writing this story out, because she knew as well as I did that a lot of the things that happened, again, were out of my control. They were circumstances that I couldn't have affected very much. And Mike always told me that when we go work out, that we're just going to show that we're faithful, and that I didn't have to have faith in him, but faith in God, that he would see what we're doing and he would know that we are being faithful, and that we believe that something beyond our understanding is going to happen. And it certainly did. I also, the part that I love to share most about my story, I used to hate having to go speak, because I'd get all these chances to go speak, and then I would have this crowd just crying everywhere, and I wouldn't know what to do. But because it is such an emotional story, it was very obviously challenging for me and emotional for me to share the story. But I'd have people just crying. I was like, that's not what I want to do, is go out and make people cry. And with the book, I've gotten so much feedback that I love, because people do feel those emotions, but I feel like if you don't feel those low emotions, you also can't feel that inspiration and that high of reaching through it and getting through those moments. And so what I'd love to share is all the highlights, because for a long time I asked God, what have I done to deserve this? To be, permanently disabled, to have lost my father at 23 years old, to have a brother who lost his girlfriend, and now in my life I've realized, what have I done to deserve the honor of walking onto that field, because I was not a football player. I was never going to lead a football team onto the field, at least not at a D1 college level. And I've had so many other moments beyond that. Most of the great moments that I love to share in the book come from moments I've been able to connect with people or speak with people and realize what my story has meant for them. Because again, I know that people ask me a lot about whether it's worth all the work I've put in, which I think back and I've written down, but a lot of it I don't remember. The challenge to the hospital, and of course the loss, and the workouts in the gym, that just hours and hours of workouts. I had so many times where I would have tears coming from my eyes, and they're like, "Are you crying?" I'm like, "Well, I'm not trying to. I'm just I have just tears coming out, because I'm giving everything I have into a workout." And I think, I don't know, knowing where I am now, I feel like it is worth it, but what has made it more than worth it for me is the effect it's been able to have on other people. And I try to encourage people to know that, because I feel blessed that people share their stories with me, and most of the time, you can't see those stories like you might be able to with mine. There's probably a story behind the situation I'm in, but I've met people, and so many of them that I don't know what their story is, but they share it with me, and it inspires me just as well. But I always encourage people, to share those stories, because that's been my greatest reward, is being able, hopefully, to connect with someone and allow the struggles I've had to help that person through their struggles, or even just to inspire them to go after whatever goal they have, because they see through what I've done that they probably don't have as big of a hill to climb. Hopefully they know. But even if they have this crazy dream that someone says it's never going to happen, or someone tells them, 1 in 100 shot, because everybody wants to be that, or everybody wants to do that, or it's just plain impossible. I know people resonate with that feeling, just because, again, even if someone doesn't tell you it's impossible, you can get the drift of what they're saying, which is it's not going to happen. And so if I can help someone achieve that, and as I said, a lot of the stories I love to share in the book are those moments where I see I was just, in a small way, able to help that person in that direction. That means the absolute world to me. And I will add, since we're at this event, one of the things I talk about in the book is getting the chance to speak at the Republican National Convention in 2016. And like most things in my life, I say, sure, why not? And I just have to laugh, because I have people say, "Do you have a bucket list of things you want?" And I'm like, no, because I would never put the crazy things I've done on a bucket list. They just happen. And even for that event, I said, sure. And I didn't hear anything for probably 2 or 3 months. And I was at an event in Florida for Knights of Columbus, and my friend that invited me to speak, he brought me the USA Today, and he put it on the page, and I said, I don't really read the newspaper, but he said, well, I think you want to read this one, and it had a list of basically unknown speakers and that were speaking at the RNC, which I think the premise of the article, as most news stories, is just how irrelevant all these speakers are, that's all they could get. And I'm on the list, which I'm extremely proud to be on there, with a female pro golfer, a captain of the, she was the first woman to captain a space flight. I mean, some incredible people. And then I realized that I guess I am speaking, because I had just talked to someone that said, would you be willing to? And I'm like, sure. And later that day, I got a call that I was going to be speaking on Thursday night, which is the night, and I thought that was really cool. Later, I realized that I would be introducing Coach Bobby Knight, and I thought that's really cool. And that's one of the things that, even at some of the events I speak at, I feel like I always run out of time of these great stories, but that's probably one of my favorites, and obviously being at a Republican event, it was so cool walking out there. I mean, it reminded me a lot of walking on the field, but it's a lot smaller crowd, a lot brighter lights, and you can't really see the crowd. It was at the Q in Cleveland, and that was pretty much the same thing, because I felt like somebody else, like I was just kind of watching, because I just kind of walk out, and then I read the teleprompter, and wave at the people, and all that, and then I walked off, and I said, what did I say? Like, what happened? But the one regret I have is that I wish I could have introduced, Bobby Knight as the next speaker, but I introduced him as a video, and I wish I would have I had a speech writer, and I sent her my speech, and she said, well, what about this, and what about that? But the only part I wish I would have kept is the part that she said, I have no idea what this is. And I said, well, everyone else will know what it is. And she said, but I don't know what it is, so no. And she shut me down. But when I introduced Bobby Knight, I wanted to wipe the sweat off my brow and say, hey, I need to sit down. Could someone throw me a chair? Younger people, Coach Knight was known for his temper, and he was also known for a game where he saw a little old lady that needed a chair, so he threw it across the basketball court to her, and I guess the referees didn't see her, but anyways, the speechwriter just didn't understand what I said. It'll get the laughs. I just want to, leave with a bang. So instead, I just introduced him as a former Ohio State basketball player, Indiana coach, Texas Tech coach, and that was pretty cool. Something that I have on my resume, And I got to meet Ted Cruz. I got to hang out in the green room and meet a lot of great speakers. They made the parking garage a makeshift press room, and I remember being there just because I was hanging out, I think on Wednesday night, and I ended up leaving. I don't know, usually I think ends 10, 11 o'clock, but around midnight, I guess I was supposed to speak for Wall Street Journal Online or something, just do this quick interview, so sure. But I was sitting at a table much like this one, and there's probably like 40 tables scattered around, and there's nobody in this parking garage. And this guy walks over, and he sits at the table, and it's kind of weird because it's just, even if you're sitting down here in some random, there's all these seats, and then they sit right next to you. It's just kind of weird, like why, there's so much space. And I realized it's Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate, and I'm like, he's trying to get my vote. I'm like, this guy's trying to get my vote. Well, he ended up bumping me. He went on first. I had to wait till like 12:15, but it was pretty funny to have a national candidate just come sit at midnight, sit in this parking garage with me. I just thought it was such a cool thing. But anyways, I've had so many great moments, and I really owe a lot to the state of Michigan, and like I said, just so many people that have supported me. I got to speak to the Michigan football team back in August before their first game, and so that was really awesome. Very cool. I actually was really worried I was going to start tearing up because I hadn't been in Schembeckler Hall in so long, but it meant so much to me, to be back there, and it's such a cool thing to be able to look at your life and see all these cool things that happen, for you. And like I said, I've had a lot of moments in my life where I could have gone down this other path, and I realize how important each one of those moments really are, and something I like to end with. And with anyone I speak to is, to take that moment to, really thank the people that have influenced you, the people that matter to you, and especially the people you love, because you never know what the future's gonna hold. But I have always clung to this hope that the future would be bright and that things would happen for me, and it took a lot longer than I wanted, but I had patience, and God has certainly done that for me, and it's an honor to be able to be here and share a moment with all of you. And I thank you again, Josh, for having me, and thank you all for being here.
We have a few minutes for questions. Take a few.
Yeah.
You mentioned God several times. Would you have a relationship with the Lord that you have today had the accident not happened?
No, she asked if I would have the same relationship with God that I do now, and I don't think I would, because I felt like I had and I think it's much like, I guess my willpower, I thought I was always very, I was always very much 100% person, go, like give it my all, and I felt like that's how my faith was as well. And going through this, doing the workouts, I realized when I was practicing or working out for basketball or cross country or whatever it was, I thought that was 100% and it wasn't. And I realized doing my workouts, I'm like, oh, this is what 100% is. And where I would find myself unable to even get out of the building because I had worked out so much. And I feel like that's a lot what my faith was, which it was a roller coaster of emotion and all of those things. But I feel like, again, it created a much stronger bond, because as much faith as I had prior to the accident, all this trauma that happened, and again, it was scary because it was on such shaky ground. Like, there's just so many emotions of bitterness or resentfulness that I battled with, or even anger that God would just allow this all to play out as it did. But going through that, I think it really did strengthen that faith, and to realize, looking back again, that God was there the whole time, and in the chaos of it all, I couldn't hear him, I couldn't see him, I couldn't feel him. But people ask me, I don't think I could get through that. Like, how did you get through it? And my initial thought is, I don't know how I got through it. I wouldn't have thought I could get through something like this. And then the answer, it comes to me, that the people praying for me, that you can't quantify. Although I've had people tell me all the time, I prayed for you, this person says I prayed for you. And I realized that those are the things that were the intangibles that I couldn't see and feel, but I did feel them. And those were things carried me through each day, that I didn't think I could go another step or another minute like that. And so that's something that I am absolutely grateful for, but I do think to myself, we can do it all over again. And I don't think I'm unselfish enough to say, yeah, I'll go through that just by my own choice, but having God put me through that, I look back and I'm grateful for the things I gained out of it. I think people ask for strength, and God sent some challenges, and then you have strengths. So. Any other questions? Yeah.
All right, so now you know that you're capable of accomplishing great things. What's next for you?
Well, I did get my MBA at Michigan during COVID, so that was a pretty good challenge. But that was one of those things, I never would have put myself through that, as far as needing to go get a Master of Business. But that was something that was kind of on. Well, also because I was tired of my brother making fun of him. He had a Michigan degree and I had a state degree, so I wanted to do that. But, and it was an awesome thing. I'm so glad I did. But it has pushed me to set up more challenges, because I do think in life you're either given challenges, and at times you're able to have the discipline to select your own challenges, and usually you're for the better if you have already given yourself challenges instead of just having one handed to you out of the blue. And I have a lot of things that are next for me. The book was a big mark on the list, which I will say that is a pretty daunting challenge, even though I had it in a journal. The story is so powerful. I didn't want to put it out there half done. I wanted to make sure it was the best it could possibly be. So my full-time job, I'm still at the family business, the Ready Mix, and so I'm doing that full-time. I'm trying to get back out and speaking more and more. My next big life goal is, well, twofold, which is I want to get back to spend more time with Mike Barwis, which he's in Florida now, so it makes it a little harder, but it's a little easier when it's winter. But I want to get back there and work out with him. I know I can make more progress, but that's not ultimately my goal. I want to have a chance to go back and work out with the hundreds of people. He trains dozens of people right now, and that's always inspired me because there's other people that want to go through this painful experience of training with this opportunity to walk again. And so that's really inspiring to meet them and to see what Mike's doing. But I want to speak and fundraise and also train with Mike again. I just turned 40, so I kind of have to get back in shape again. So, but that's a big one on my list. It's not so much. It used to always be, what's your next goal for your physical progress? But now it's so many other things, which is another huge thing I prayed for, was opportunity. And now it's like, okay, that's too much. Okay, it gets hard to choose where your next step is. But I'm very blessed with that. So.
One more question. Go ahead, Mary.
I just wanted to share something with you. You said you had spoken at Knights of Columbus, and my son-in-law is a general agent for Knights of Columbus Insurance, and he has 5 children.
Yeah. Wow.
And he was speaking to his priest and talking about, what can I do? How do I get more patience?
Yeah.
And the priest looked at him and said, that's the one thing I would not recommend, asking God for more patience, because you know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
you people who pray for strength don't really usually go with that thought process and say He gives you these challenges because we just want the strength.
Yeah. Wait, so did he pray for that before kids or after?
I think he prayed a lot more after he had the children, but like I say, he works with Knights of Columbus. They're very active in the Catholic Church, so they pray all the time.
Well, that's probably another one of the challenges for the future.
There you go.
Thank you for that.
Brock, thank you so much. Awesome stuff right there, Brock. I followed Brock's story when it all happened. I'm a big Michigan football fan, and just hearing that and reading the book, it's pretty amazing stuff, and definitely inspires you. So if you haven't had a chance to pick up the book yet, definitely see Brock before he leaves, and scoop one of those up. I don't know if you folks have noticed, we had some special guests tonight. NPR is in the house tonight, and they've been interviewing a few of us, checking things out, taking some pictures, checking what America First Hillsdale is all about. And I want to give them a few minutes before we break, and let them ask us a few questions. So, come on in.
Thank you. Hi.
You get the honors, huh?
Yeah, this is so strange. Yeah, usually Thank you guys for letting us hang out and listen in today. I guess the reason I wanted to come up here, I was going to ask you individually, but I thought this might be more. You can't hear me? I was going to ask you individually, but I thought this would be more efficient. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. So earlier in the evening, I heard a lot of you express some skepticism about the election process itself. So I just wanted to ask a yes or no question. How many of you feel like faith in the process come November when you're going to vote? Yes or no? Do you feel good about the process? Do you trust that it will be fair? No. Raise your hand if it's a no, so I can really see. That's every hand except for 3. Oh, well. But a couple. You're yes or can I ask why not?
I'm not real sure. I just moved back from here.
Just 1 second.
I just moved back to the area 40 years ago, so I'm not that.
no, which is most of you. Could you tell me why? Right here.
Okay, Dinesh D'Souza made a very good film about election integrity, 2,000 Mules. He's got another film out about Trump, and at the end of it, he talks about election integrity in Michigan. And in Michigan, it is perfectly legal to take an election ballot to a printer and make 10,000 copies. Now, with these absentee ballot boxes, that alone makes me greatly mistrust the upcoming presidential election.
Do many of you agree with him? Yes, sir.
I'm afraid we might not even have an election.
Sorry.
Anymore.
You're sorry?
My feeling is we won't have an election
Why?
because we'll be at war. They're
Really?
doing everything to destroy this country to have their one world government.
Yeah.
And, God's got it though, because God looks at, Trump as coming through some of the Christians. God is always, when Jesus talks to the people that hear his voice, he always says, my David. God looks at Trump as my David. When you put the two people together, they're like brothers. Because David did his deal and Trump did his deal, they're like brothers. And so that's a real pat on the back for Jesus calling Trump my David. That is a real big deal. So God's doing something. He's got his hands on it. What happened was, we knew we won the election 4 years ago, and they cheated. We proved it. But God didn't let it go. He wanted to let this all happen for another 4 years so that people start understanding what the Democrats and what the rhinos have done. They destroyed this country. So it's up in the air. It's up to God, okay?
I see Ziad behind you.
And also I wanted to say, we're part of the Trump Force 47 where we went door knocking. And we went to a place that had assisted living, people living there. And they wouldn't let us approach the people living there, but when we asked about some of the people on the roster, because it said like there was a 100-year-old citizen that lived there, the lady told us, oh no, that person's been dead for a couple years, but they're still listed on the ballot roster as a voter.
Are you all voting?
Yes.
So even though you don't trust the process 100%, you are voting?
Yeah.
If the outcome is something that you don't trust, what happens then? Sorry, I heard you said what?
What happens then?
I'm asking you.
They'll
I
do
heard
the
somebody
same
say
thing they
revolution.
did when just deny it, saying everything was good, and then the mainstream media, oh, it was an honest and fair election, everything was fine, and they just kept that narrative, and then they just went by the wayside after that.
Who said, I heard the word revolution, who said that? Wait, sorry, who said that? No.
Nobody said it,
Oh,
you said it,
okay.
and I got a question for you
Sure,
in
go
regard to
ahead. I heard,
that.
that's what I
Why
heard.
do you, in the media, constantly feel compelled to try to rattle the cage? You were putting ideas out there that you were hoping will lead to sensational news stories and
No.
No?
I'm just asking the questions.
Okay, why would you ask revolution when not another person in this room heard
I
that?
100% thought I heard it.
And that's not
If
the
I
first
didn't
time
hear it.
tonight I've heard that come out of your mouth.
Me?
Yes, you. You were interviewing somebody earlier today,
Did
and you
someone
used
say
the
it?
word revolution.
I honestly heard it, and so that's all
Somebody
that's
did
the only
say
reason
it
I
over
asked.
here.
Yes, sir.
She wanted
There's
clarification.
many different types of revolution.
Yeah,
This right here, this room is a revolution.
yeah.
We are a bunch of grassroots people that came together because we didn't like what the established Republican Party was doing, because it didn't fit our values. This in itself is a revolution. A revolution doesn't have to be bloody. It doesn't have to be violent. It can be absolutely peaceful. And that's what we're doing here.
Why we don't trust them.
Sure.
As everybody knows, the divide in this country is tremendous.
Yeah.
And I've been seeing a deluge of both political ads, and I have to tell you that so many of them are out and out lies, they are distortions, you name it, they keep going and going. How can you, if you have somebody that lies to you a lot, how quick are you to believe them? And they just have to tell you something else.
Or did you want to say something?
Yeah, just one other thing on that. I think I said to you earlier,
Yeah.
that a lot of the campaign things that I've seen on TV are absolute lies. But what I find astonishing is coming from the same people that want to set up a ministry of truth and decide who can say what is truth and who can say what's not truth. And they're the ones that are putting the lies out.
Yes.
This scares a lot of us.
I want to say thank you so much for letting us hang out tonight. We really appreciate it. And Josh, thank you for letting me ask a question.
All right, everybody. That concludes our public meeting for the night. We appreciate everyone coming. I would like to ask all members to stick around and conduct our executive meeting for leadership and some other key factors for the upcoming year. So we'll take a quick break, let our guests find the exit, and then we'll come together here in 5 minutes and conduct that meeting. Okay, folks?